All right, so I'm going to talk to you today about using Zoom. I'm going to talk to you about using Zoom, specifically about settings, some new things that have come up since we initially got Zoom, as well as polls and breakout rooms. And so we're going to start with covering the very basics. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about Zoom settings, Zoom meetings, the Zoom toolbar, host and sharing. Then I'm going to talk to you about using participant feedback, setting up polls, breakout rooms, and then putting it all together. So Zoom settings. So one of the things that you need to make sure is that your global settings in Zoom have some certain things turned on. So let's go over and take a look at what I mean by that. So to get to your global settings, you're going to go click on My GCC, wait patiently. Type in your password and your username. Hopefully you typed it in the right direction. And then you're going to click on Zoom. Always, 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 always click on settings when you get to this page. When you get to this page, this is where you're going to find your global settings. So your global settings are whatever settings that you have that are specific for every single meeting that you will make. Any changes that you make to your global settings, again, go for every meeting that you make going forward. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat, but it's just Forrest and I, so be patient with the response. So the next thing you're going to do when you get here is you're going to click on settings. And this is where you're going to notice a few changes. The first change is going to be the very first thing is the waiting room is turned on. However, there are waiting room options now. Be very careful what you choose on your waiting room options. If you do not have everyone will go to the waiting room, then it is possible that if someone is authenticated, they will be able to get into your meeting, or if you happen to be having a private session with someone or an interview and they are authenticated at from any VCCS institution, they could possibly enter without going to a waiting room. So to make sure you have it on everyone, you're going to click on Edit Options, and then you're going to make sure that everyone is what is chosen if it isn't there. The next thing you're going to see is require a passcode when scheduling new meetings is automatically going to be on, and you must leave that on. Require a passcode for instant meetings, again, is on, and you must leave it on. The embed invite link with one quick click join should be turned on. If it's not, you can turn that on. You don't need to turn the next three options on. The next one is when you're scheduling a meeting. I always want to schedule a meeting and have my video on. So I turned this option on, which is why you see over here on the right, you have modified and reset. Participant video is totally up to you. I like to allow my participants to decide whether or not they want their camera on. So I do not have that option as automatic on. The next place is audio type, touch nothing. It always, always should say telephone and computer. You do not ever want to turn on join before host. As well as the next one is on, so you don't need to worry about that. mute participants upon entry. I highly suggest that you have that on and keep it on. If you have the Zoom desktop client, which I'll show you where you can get that if you don't, and you can download that to your Germana computer without having to have a admin password from Tech Services, we'll bring up a meeting reminder to you 5 minutes before. And again, you can see that I have this turned on, which is why I have the modified and reset. The next thing is, just skip that one, the third party, you have to have that on. Chat. The reason mine says modified and reset is because I have the checkbox here for participants it's basically cannot save the chat. If I want to save the chat, I can, but participants cannot. And the next one is private chat. So allow meeting participants to send private chat to each other. I have turned off. Auto saving of chat, that means that every meeting would have the chat saved to whomever created the meeting. You have the ability to turn on a sound when someone joins or leaves, and I have that automatically on for every session, that meeting that I create. And only the host and co-hosts can hear it. And I actually turn it off once I get the meeting started. And then we have file transfer, obviously is locked by admin. I leave the feedback to Zoom. Co-host, this is the option for anyone who is a co-host to have the same in-meeting controls as the host. I have that turned on. Polling, here's where you want to make sure that you have this turned on. And I have the option to always show meeting control bar, because if you do not have this option on, the Zoom toolbar can disappear. And if you have multiple screens, sometimes it's kind of hard to find where it goes. So if you need to do a lot of screen sharing, or you have multiple screens, I highly suggest that you turn on this always show meeting control bar. The screen sharing, you should not bother. It should always, in the global settings, be host only. I am going to show you later on how to allow other participants. Annotation tool, you're probably going to want to turn this on so that you can allow participants or students to annotate. Whiteboard, I have it allow autos, you can save the whiteboard content. And the next thing is nonverbal feedback. So in the participants window, you can turn on the ability for your participants to give you a thumbs up, a go faster, go slower, yes and no. So you can use it as for kind of silent feedback, kind of to figure out how things are going. Meeting reactions, so that's an emoji that will show on top of your video, and it will disappear after 10 seconds. And I will talk to you about that as well. I'm going to scroll on down a little bit more. And in meeting advanced, here is where you're going to make sure that your breakout room is turned on. You can also choose to allow the host to assign participants when scheduling. There's a few little quirks with that, but that's something you might be interested in. Now, if you notice here, I have both of these are modified. So the difference is this: if you are allowing remote support, then you cannot have breakout rooms on. So the reason that both of these are turned on is because I sometimes go between the two. Closed captioning, you cannot close caption unless you have someone to do it, so don't worry about that. Captions, don't worry about that. Virtual background, you want to make sure that you have that turned on, and you can also check the box for allow videos for virtual backgrounds. You also have something new called video filters, and if you haven't found those yet, we'll talk about those in just a few minutes. And you also want to leave on that your guests are identified, and even though you sign in and you type in your name, when you do that, in my list it has your name, and then in parentheses it says guest, and that tells me that you were not authenticated before you came into the meeting. And again, we'll go over how to make sure that happens. And we'll scroll on down. And pretty much that's all of the notifications that you really need to worry about. Now I'm going to go back up to the top and I'm going to click on recording because this would be the only other place in your global settings that you'll want to check. By default now, local recording is off. So if you want to record locally to your computer, you will need to turn it back on. I do not have the option for hosts can give participants the permission to record locally. One of the things you need to remember about breakout rooms is even if you are recording, what goes on in a breakout room is not recorded by you. The only way that you can have breakout rooms recorded is to request that someone in the breakout room record locally to their computer. Okay, so the next one is cloud recording, and this is what I suggest for every kind of recording because you do not have to wait for your computer. You don't have to worry about the internet. If something happens and you need a second copy, it's going to still be there. The reason mine has modified and reset is that I did not need all of these files. I only wanted one file, which is the active speaker and shared screen, and the record audio only file, and those are the only ones I wanted. And then underneath, I did have an audio transcript and record thumbnails. The rest of these I haven't touched, and nor will I. Okay, so let's go back. Over here. So, as a quick review, you're going to want to enable your waiting room. You're going to turn on embed passcode. You can make your decisions about chat and private chat. You want to turn on polling. You can decide about showing the meeting control bar. You can make your decision about annotation and whiteboard. You're going to want to turn on nonverbal feedback and breakout rooms. And then on your recording settings, you're going to want to decide whether or not you want to record locally, and if you do record to the cloud, how many files do you want? Okay, so now we're going to move on to Zoom meetings. So, how do you schedule a meeting? Again, in your global settings, notice that I am not using Outlook, and nor do I suggest using Outlook. I am not using Canvas. We do not suggest that at all. When you're scheduling any kind of meeting, whether it's a class meeting, a one-on-one meeting, a department meeting, any kind of meeting, you want to schedule it from your global settings. So back in our settings, I'm going to click on meetings. And I will click on new meeting. When you get to this screen, I highly suggest you give the topic or the title of whatever it is you're going to be covering. So I'll call this department meeting for, okay. So you could give it a description if you wanted to, kind of unnecessary. You can pick the date, decide the time, duration, whatever. Now, if you are doing something that you know is going to reoccur and you don't know exactly when, and it's going to change between Mondays and Tuesdays to Thursday and Friday, then you may want to consider doing a recurring meeting. Now, when you do recurring, you have some choices. You can do daily, weekly, monthly, no fixed time. I choose no fixed time. And the reason that I choose no fixed time is it generates a unique meeting ID that I can reuse as many times as I need to. Then I also don't have to worry about what's on the Zoom calendar if I change it or I move it or anything like that. The next two options are going to be, may look different to you. This is where you have a decision. You can leave it as it is, which means you will have to supply your participants with a passcode, but it would also enable a waiting room. However, you can uncheck passcode and leave the waiting room. Now, what this means is all of the participants will go to the waiting room, but they won't have to have a password. Now, I prefer it that way. However, some people do not. But what you need to know is you either have to have a passcode or a waiting room. If you try to uncheck both, then Zoom is automatically now going to enable a waiting room. So I just choose to leave the waiting room because I think that's easier and it provides a buffer in case I see people who possibly are in the waiting room who I don't know and I might not want to let them in. Again, I don't mess with anything on video. I don't mess with anything on audio. And I always make sure that mute participants upon entry is checked. Alternative hosts and co-hosts are different. So, and there's some subtle differences, but just know that they are different. And when you're all done with that, you're going to click on save, and then your meeting will show up in your list. So here you can see my list, and you can see that some of my meetings up here at the top, obviously, are the ones that just are anytime that I can reuse, but they're very specific. And others I have created that are specifically labeled. Any old meetings are still here if I needed to reuse them for some reason. So keep that in mind as well. If you have recordings, those are also going to be found here in the global settings. And if you have anything saved locally, it will show up here as well as on your computer. And you can see that there are only 3 files, and then this obviously was 21 files. And that was because we did start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Okay, so to review, again, it's click on the meeting, schedule a new meeting, give the meeting a name, find if you want to make it recurring, you can then make it recurring, but you can also choose no fixed time. You want to uncheck the passcode if you do not want to require that, but remember that you will have a waiting room, and you want to make sure that mute participants upon entry is checked. So I see some questions in the chat, so I'm going to stop for just a second. So I've had a lot of questions about classes that are meeting synchronously. The key is Zoom is not going to send out a reminder based upon the days and times that you pick. That's going to be up to you to do in Canvas. So whether or not you choose to put your synchronous sessions into Zoom exactly as they will be is up to you. You could call it ITE 115 Friday and know that it's going to be every Friday, and instead of giving it a time or a amount of time, then if you I just choose no fixed time, and then that way it's the same one. I also have a different one for office hours than I do for a synchronous session. I do not suggest passcodes because students it's highly likely that they may be joining from a mobile device. And if you do not have it in a place where they can find it, it's going to be difficult and they will be very frustrated. However, if you use a waiting room, then it is up to you to let them in. However, I would have a discussion about when they come into the session, make sure they put their name correctly when they log in. I'm just reading. No, if you have breakout rooms selected, and the other thing is if you're worried about a meeting and you're not sure of the settings, if you created it, you can always click on it at any point in time, even if it's before it's actually supposed to occur, and then you can check to see that if the settings that you wanted are available. So if you wanted to check for those breakout rooms, you could actually click on that meeting and start it, and check the toolbar to see if the breakout room little icon shows up. I think I got all of the questions. So now it's time for you to do a little activity. Yes, Forrest.
We got one more question real quick since we are in the question portion. It's about having an alternative host and the main host leaves. Yes, the meeting will continue with the alternative host. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The main host, though, won't be able to join a different meeting while that's still going on, correct?
Correct. So if you happen to have, if you are setting up meetings for someone else, let's just say it that way, or you set a meeting up and you make your department person an alternative host because whatever, and then you have to go to another meeting and host it. The first meeting that you set up will have to end before your second meeting can start. So for example, let me think, a professional development day and multiple sessions are going on and one person's like, hey, I don't want to bother everybody. I'm going to do this all myself. And they try to set up all these meetings. And what's going to happen is if one meeting runs long, in order for the next meeting to start, they will have to end the first meeting, even if people are there, even if there's an alternative host. So keep in mind that alternative hosts will be the host if you leave, but you can't start another meeting even if you do leave. So I'm going to give you a little activity because I want everybody to kind of go and check out their Zoom settings, just kind of to make sure that they are where they need to be. And since we've had a bunch of updates lately, it's a good time for everybody to take a look. So this is a 5-minute activity. And I'm going to give you all, like I said, a chance. I'm going to leave this up here. If you have questions during that time, please put them in the chat. Also, when you are finished with your activity, if you would go to the participants bar at the bottom of the Zoom window, or it could be at the top under options, and go to the participants list, you have some choices, and those choices are to pick a feedback. So if you're done, when you get finished with your activity, if you would come back to the Zoom and click on participants and then choose yes, I will watch for everybody to be done, and then we will move on. So I'm going to turn on my little timer, and now you all have 5 minutes to check out your Zoom settings. again. When you're all done, make sure you come back and click on the participants and give me a yes. I have 2 yeses. And there are 32 people minus 4, so now that makes 30 because that's the only math I can do. So have 9.
Sandy, I realize I can't share and show it to you. The yes is at the bottom of the participant list.
So click on participants and then you'll see it at the bottom. So we have 11. $16. All right, that is what I was looking for. So now we're gonna move on. All right. I felt like we probably needed to spend a little time on the toolbar as a host. So lots of things to look at. So we're gonna start over on the left. So first of all, you have your microphone. And if you have multiple microphones, you are going to click on the little arrow right here. Oh, here, let me turn this on. Right here. And then you will have a list of however many microphones and or speakers that you have, and you can always test it out at any point. Next to that, of course, is the video. And of course, if you click on it, that stops the video, or if you click on the microphone, it mutes the mic. Again, you have your video options are here. Here's also where you're now going to find your new video filters as well as your virtual backgrounds. The next option is the security shield. This was not here when we first got Zoom. So I wanted to spend just a moment going over that. If you are in a meeting and you want to allow other people to share, you are going to click on the shield and then right next to share screen, just click and then a check mark will show up and then other people can then share their screen. Chat is the same thing. If it is checked, then they have the ability to chat. If it's checked, then they have the ability to unmute themselves. So if you want to take that away from participants, then those are some quick ways to do it. You also, if you have more than one participant, which you can see in this meeting, you can actually report a participant from here as well. So if you do happen to have someone who enters a meeting and is not supposed to be and is causing problems, you can report them to Zoom and then they will take care of tracing them and finding out who it is and whatnot. The next one is the participant window, which if you see in the screenshot at the bottom of the participant window, you're going to see these icons, yes, no, slower, faster, and under more is where you find the little coffee cup and the thumbs up and the thumbs down. And as the host, you can choose to clear all. And then also, if you click under that, you have an invite, a mute all, and then a 3 dots, which is basically more. And for that, you have the following options below that. When you went and you turned on polling, when you turn on Zoom, you will now have the icon for poll. Chat is going to be here. And within the chat, when you open the window, you notice that you can choose to whom you want to chat with. And as the host, I can choose everyone publicly, host only, or no one. I'm going to skip the share screen for just a second. Record, here is where your options to record either to the computer or to the cloud. Here's your breakout room option. Again, when you click on it, it's going to ask you how many rooms do you want, and then automatically assign people or manually assign. And then the last option is reactions. And those are the reactions or emojis that you can, we actually have more of them now, where you can, which actually show up on your little video picture. So to share your screen, click on the green. And what can you share? You can share your entire screen, which is what I'm doing. And everything that shows up on that screen will be available to the participants. And because I have 3 screens, you can see that I have, that's why it says screen 1, 2, and 3. And you have the whiteboard option because that was turned on in global settings. You have the ability to share an iPhone or iPad. No, sorry, Android is not an option. And at the bottom, this is where you can share specific applications. So if you're not sure about icons, such as, I know that this is Firefox, I know that's Outlook, I know that the, as I call it, the beach ball is Chrome. So if you only want to share that application, you can choose to do it that way. And then anything else on your screen would not be viewable to your participants. The other thing you want to take note of are the 2 boxes at the bottom that often get overlooked. One is which is to share your computer sound, and the other is to optimize screen sharing for a video clip. So if you're sharing a video, you want to make sure that before you click share, you check the box here. At the top of the share, that was the basic, so that was this section. If you click on advanced, these are the options that you have. So you can share a portion of a screen, and it's a green box that you can resize to whatever size you want it. You can share music or computer sound only. And if you have a document camera, that's going to be this option over here, content from a second camera. Now, when you are sharing, your Zoom toolbar kind of changes just a bit. So you still have mute and stop video, security, participants. Now, everything else has been moved over into the more area. You also can stop sharing, you can stop recording, you can pause the sharing. And then if you click on the more that was at the end of that toolbar, you're going to have these options. So here you can have your breakout rooms, your record, your annotation things, your computer sound if you forgot. So those are all then collapsed into the more area. The other thing you can do at any time is pop out the chat window, pop out the participant window, and move the video window. So sometimes what I do, for example, in this today, I have the chat window open, the participant window open, and the videos all over on my 3rd screen. And I'm glancing over there every now and then, but that way I can kind of keep track of what's going on while I've got stuff happening. All right, so let's keep on going. So again, here, if you're going to set this up for others to share, you can do it from the security shield here, okay? And you will need to do this each time you are in a meeting and you want others to share. But it's really easy to click on the shield, click on share screen, and then other people can share. Okay, so now we're going to talk about polls, reactions, and feedback. So you can create polls before a meeting. You can reuse polls. You can also find results from polls with reports, and they can be used on the fly. So one of the things that I will tell you is trying to create a poll on the fly is not as easy as you think. So what I'm going to do now is actually show you what that looks like. So if I click on polls, hopefully you can now see a little polling window. I'm not sure you can. And it says add a question. However, the problem is I don't have any questions. So now what it did was it took me to my Zoom meeting, and it basically brought up the meeting that I'm in. And you can choose to make it anonymous. Yes, no. And then you can click save. So now I can launch that poll. And you should have had that pop up on your screen. So that is one way that you can do, that's on the fly. However, you can also create them before. If you choose to add the polls to a meeting, let's go take a look at what that looks like. So if I go back to a meeting, and let's click on this one. And I scroll all the way to the bottom. Here is where you're going to create your polls. So you can click add. You can give your poll a title. You can type in your question. Now, what you will notice, you only have the choice of either single choice or multiple choice. No fill in the blank, none of that. It's not fancy or anything. It's really, truly just click. You can also add more questions to a single poll. When you're finished, you click save. So adding a poll is something that you can do before or you can do it during, but know that if you do it during, you're going to have to type and talk at the same time and try to get it up, which can not go as smoothly as others. But let's say you actually created a poll and you wanted to find those reports. So if I click on reports, now here's where it's very strange. So usage, what you'd think, but it's actually under meeting. So here you can click on view registration reports and polls. And then you can see here that if I wanted to, this is the meeting report, but if you click on report queue, this is actually where the poll reports would be found. They're kind of helpful, but if people did not log in as authenticated and they are showing up as guest, then you will have a huge long list of guest. So here's another kind of screenshot of where things are. And of course the polling is here in the middle of your Zoom toolbar. This is what the window looks like if you want to, that's where you type your questions as I showed you. And of course this is at the bottom of your meeting in Zoom. So now we're going to talk about reactions and feedback. I know some people may have had some trouble finding the participants. So at the top of your Zoom screen, you're going to see a exit full screen option. And if you exit full screen, you should be able to find the participant icon. And when you click on it, you should see raise hand, yes, no, go slower, go faster, more, thumbs up, thumbs down. Also, at the bottom of your Zoom window, you're going to see some new reactions. So it used to just be the thumbs up and the clapping. Now you actually have the little heart and the crying face emoji and the surprised emoji and the celebrations. So if you have found those reactions at the bottom of your Zoom window, would you please give me a celebration reaction? And if you don't have the celebration, you can use a thumbs up. And you have to update your Zoom client in order to have the new reactions. If you don't have it updated, you'll have to, if you have a Germana computer, you will need to talk to tech services. That's a push out update. If it's your personal computer, then you'll need to, you can update it yourself. Lorraine, the answer to your question is you want to use reactions during a meeting, because if they do not log in correctly, if you needed to go back to review who said what, you're not going to be able to, because they'll all show up as guests. To set up polling, that's in your settings.
Well, Paige, my question there was it just asking how to turn on polling for meetings, or actually like how to set up?
I'm trying to read fast.
Yeah, or how to set up questions in advance. I wasn't sure which was that the actual question.
One of the things I wanted to make sure that I showed you was how to download the client so that it actually is on your computer and you can always be logged in. And when you enter a meeting, you'll make sure that you're always not a guest. So let me pop back over. So when you get to this Zoom page, the third option here is settings. However, if you go straight below it, you're going to see download client. The key to this is that your domain is VCCS. It's going to ask you your domain, and then it's going to ask you for your credentials to log in to MyGCC. So it's going to be the exact same username and password that you use to log in to MyGCC. When you do that, you will have a Zoom client, which is different. It will actually have its own little window that pops open, and you'll be able to see some meetings and things like that. I don't think I can show that to you, but I think I can take a screenshot. So hold on just a second. I'll say that now. So if you have the Zoom client, this is what I'm talking about. This will also allow you to change your settings for things here. The little wheel is more settings. For example, I think I saw somebody talk about this. you click on the little cog wheel here, what pops open is that. So you can change it. You can decide how early you want to be reminded before a meeting. And then there are other options, and you have plenty you can go through from here. So these are some tools that you have available. And again, this is using, you will not see this unless you have the Zoom client. It won't look like this anyway. All right, let's go on. And the last thing we're going to talk about is some breakout rooms. Breakout rooms, setting them up. Easy peasy, turn it on in the global settings, which we already did. You can create the rooms while you're in the meeting. Doesn't take any time. You can figure out how many rooms you need and toss people in there. You can also pre-assign them when making the meeting, but that is actually done inside of your Zoom global settings area when you're making the meeting. However, your participants must authenticate in order for any kind of pre-assigned breakout rooms to work flawlessly. And I'll be honest with you, we have yet to have it work right, and we kind of know what we're doing. So when you click on breakout rooms, the first thing you're going to see is a window that's going to ask you whether you want to manually or automatically create the breakout rooms. The next thing, once you choose, make a decision, the next thing you're going to see are some options here. You can allow participants to return to the main session. You can close them after a certain number of minutes, and you can begin a countdown timer that you can change once you've decided that they need to come back to the main room. You can also add a room from here, and if you hover anywhere between assign and the breakout room, you're going to see rename or delete. And since this is a screenshot, that's kind of why it didn't work. All right. So if you're going to pre-assign, when you're setting that meeting up, when we got down to the bottom of the meeting, you remember the mute participants upon entry. Here is where the option to pre-assign breakout rooms. It's going to ask you to create rooms, or you can actually import from a CSV. That is super, super tricky. Any extra spaces or anything like that can cause havoc on your import. And then you're going to also have to make sure that you know your students' MyGCC login information so that you can put them into the breakout room assignment correctly. So that's something else. But here is a quick way, by the way, if you need to find your information for your students, you can go to Canvas, click on the course, go to People. It's the second column. The login ID is their MyGCC. That's how they get to their email, and that is their login information. Not their password, just their username. So when you click on breakout rooms, and I should have had this slide before, this is the first thing, whether you have automatic or manual, and you can also move people around even after you choose that. And you can also create more rooms after you've made the decision on how many rooms you thought you might need. So if you are deciding to do it manually, when you create the breakout rooms, here you can see the rename or delete. If you click on the blue assign, you're going to get a list of all the participants. You just check the box and then you move to the next room. And anyone that's already in a room will be removed from the list. Once they're in a room, you can move them and I'll show you how to do that in the next screen. So once you've put people in rooms, if you hover next to them, it gives you options to remove them or move them to another room. The other thing you're going to notice at the bottom here is a broadcast message that you can send out to all rooms. You can let them know what they're supposed to be working on. You can tell them how many minutes are left or things like that. Okay, so now for a little fun. I'm going to click on breakout rooms. I'm going to automatically make 7 rooms, create. Okay, I'm going to send you to some breakout rooms where you can chat with each other. And I'm going to give you 3 minutes and then I'm going to bring everybody back. Okay, I see everybody's coming back. And we have one group that's not back yet, so they're automatically going to be back in 13 seconds though. All right, so everybody should be back now from their breakout rooms. So hopefully that kind of gave you the ability to kind of see what it's like. As the host, you can move between the rooms. As a co-host, you can also move between the rooms. What you can't do is record what is going on inside of the breakout room. Someone actually in the breakout room would have to record locally for that. So Make your Zoom meetings engaging. Make sure your settings are ready before. Make your meetings, make sure you post them all over the place. Add some polls during the session. Ask for reactions and feedback. You might want to take the time at the beginning of the meeting to go over where a few things are if it's something new, and use breakout rooms. And so I wanted to say, be like her and make your Zoom engaging, and then you will have happy people in your rooms. So this is our team. It's Forrest and I. You know, we are the mighty duo. And if you have any questions about Zoom or anything else, you know where to find us. And I would like to say thanks. And now I am going to stop the recording, and I will give you the ability to unmute yourself after you raise your hand. Please raise your hand first because there's a bunch of people in here.
So Lorraine's question is actually